The crow that watched you this morning may have known your face for years. Think about that. The black bird on the wire above your driveway, the one that tilted its head when you walked out for the mail. You looked at it for half a second and forgot it existed, but it did not forget you. It cannot forget you. And this is not folklore or superstition. This is documented science, repeated under controlled conditions, published in peer-reviewed journals. Crows recognize individual human faces. They remember them for years. They hold grudges. They teach those grudges to birds that were never even there. And when one of their own dies, they gather around the body in numbers, in something that looks unbearably like a funeral. Now hold that fact in your hands, because we are about to do something strange with it. 4,000 years ago, in the river valleys of southern Mesopotamia, scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into wet clay, and among those marks are texts that describe birds as watchers, not as animals, as eyes positioned over the world of men, gathering what they saw and carrying it somewhere, to someone. The clay does not say the birds were curious, it says they were sent, and it names in its own ancient grammar who they answered to. So tonight we are going to ask a question that sits right at the edge of what we can prove. The science tells us the memory is real. The birds genuinely know your face. The tablets, far older than the science, claim to know why. And the moment those two things touch is the moment the ordinary world outside your window stops feeling ordinary. By the end of this, you will never look at a crow the same way again. Let us begin with what is certain. Let us begin with the part no one can dismiss. In the early 2000s, a wildlife biologist named John Marsluff at the University of Washington designed one of the most quietly unsettling studies in the history of animal cognition. The question was deceptively simple. Could a wild crow tell one human being from another, remember a specific face, and act on that memory years later? Most scientists would have assumed the answer was no. A crow is a bird. Surely one human looks much like another to it. To test it, Marsluff and his students did something almost theatrical. They put on rubber masks, because a researcher's own face changes with a haircut or a coat, and the team needed a single stable face to track, so they chose one, a rubber caveman mask, heavy-browed and brutish. That mask would become the villain. Wearing it, the researchers captured 7 wild crows on campus, banded them, held them briefly, and released them completely unharmed. No crow was hurt. But to the crows, the experience was a violation, a threat, and crucially, a face attached to that threat, the caveman face. Then they took the masks off and walked away as anonymous people, and the crows paid them no mind at all. And here is the elegant, chilling control they built into it. To be sure, the crows were reacting to that specific dangerous face, and not just to any mask. They used a second mask as a neutral control, one that never captured or threatened anyone. The face they chose for the harmless one was a rubber mask of the politician Dick Cheney, the caveman who hurt them, and the politician who never did. What happened next is the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up. The crows remembered, not vaguely, precisely. When a researcher walked the grounds wearing the caveman mask, captured crows would erupt, diving at it, screaming, mobbing, scolding it with the harsh, rattling alarm call, crows reserved for genuine enemies. And the Cheney mask, worn in the very same places by the very same people, drew almost nothing. The crows had separated the two faces in their minds. One was danger, one was not. They were not reacting to humans or to masks. They were reacting to a single specific face that had wronged them, and then it spread. This is the detail that turns a clever animal story into something colder. Crows that had never been captured, that had only watched the commotion from the branches above, learned to hate the caveman face too. They mobbed it on sight, though it had never done a thing to them. The grudge moved horizontally through the flock, bird to bird, like a rumor, like news, and it did not fade. Marsluff returned year after year, walking the same grounds in the same caveman face. The numbers held and even grew as the alarm propagated. Years after the original 7 birds were briefly held and released, crows were still diving at that rubber face. The scolding had outlasted the offense by half a decade and more. And the most haunting part is generational. Crows that were not even hatched when the captures happened learned to mob a face they had personally never seen, threaten anyone. They inherited the grudge. The memory was being handed down. Read that slowly. A crow can hold a grudge against a specific human face for the better part of a generation, teach it to unrelated birds, and pass it to its own offspring, so that the memory of your face can outlive the bird that first saw you. And it is not only behavior. Maslow and his colleagues took the work into the brain itself. They scanned crows shown one of two faces, a threatening face and a caring one, using imaging that reveals which regions are burning energy. When a crow looked at the threatening face, the regions tied to fear, to perception of danger, to learning, and the laying down of memory switched on, the avian counterparts of the very structures that fire in your own skull when you see something that frightens you. So the recognition is not a reflex, not instinct misfiring. It is cognition. There is a mind in there, looking at your face, deciding what you are, and remembering. The crow is thinking about you, filing you away. So here is the eerie everyday truth. Before we go anywhere near the ancient world, if you have ever chased a crow off your garbage, thrown something at one, or harmed one where it could see your face, then somewhere in your neighborhood there may be a crow that knows you, that recognizes your gait, your jacket, the geometry of your features, and it may already have told the others. You may be, right now, a face in a registry you never agreed to join, kept by a creature you have never bothered to look at twice. That is the science. That is settled. Now let us turn toward the clay, and let us be honest at every step about where the proof ends and the mystery begins. But first, sit with a smaller mystery, because it makes the rest land harder. Why crows? Of all the animals that share our streets, why is it the black bird that watches with such intelligence? Because crows, ravens, magpies and jays, the family scientists call corvids, are not ordinary minds wearing feathers. They are among the most intelligent creatures on this planet, and the closer the researchers look, the stranger it becomes. Consider the tools. On the island of New Caledonia, there lives a crow that does not merely use tools, but manufactures them. New Caledonian crows strip twigs clean, fashion hooks, and tear stiff leaves into precise probing instruments, choosing the right tool for each task like a craftsman selecting from a drawer. In one famous case, a captive crow named Betty, given a straight piece of wire and a treat sunk out of reach in a tube, bent the wire into a hook with her beak to fish the food out, a solution she had never been taught. In laboratory puzzles, these birds have solved sequences requiring multiple tools in the correct order, one tool to obtain a second to reach the reward, a chain of reasoning scientists once believed belonged only to great apes and to us. And there is the experiment built around an ancient story, too perfect to leave out. Aesop told of a thirsty crow that found a pitcher with the water too low to reach and dropped pebbles into it one by one until the water rose to its beak. For 2,500 years, that was just a fable. Then scientists tested it. They gave corvids a tube of water with a treat floating out of reach and a supply of stones, and the birds dropped the stones in, one after another, raising the water until the reward came within reach, preferring sinking stones to floating ones. They understood, in some functional sense, that solid objects displace water. A story we invented to teach morals turned out to describe a real capacity in a real mind, confirmed in the laboratory. It goes further still, into territory that feels less like biology and more like psychology. Ravens plan for the future, a feat once thought to belong only to humans and the great apes. In a landmark study, the researchers Concabadai and Matthias Oswarth gave ravens a tool that could open a puzzle box of food, then took the box away. Later, with no box in sight, the ravens were offered that tool alongside immediately tempting distractions, and they chose the tool and kept it, sometimes for hours, until the box reappeared and they could use it. They were planning for a future that did not yet exist, refusing a small certain treat now to hold the right instrument for a reward they only anticipated. The same ravens learned to barter and to refuse a poor immediate offer because they were holding out for the planned one. Self-control, foresight and trade in a bird. And they understand being watched. This is perhaps the most unnerving capacity of all. Corvids cache food for later, and they are acutely sensitive to who might be observing. A raven or a scrub jay, will hide its food more carefully or return later to move it if it suspects a rival saw where it was buried. In one striking experiment, ravens behaved as though they grasped that a hidden competitor could be spying through a small peephole, adjusting their caching as if aware of an observer they could not see. They model the minds of others. They understand, at some level, what it is to be seen, a haunting thing to discover about a creature whose entire reputation across human history is that of the watcher. And then there is the behavior that unsettles even the scientists who study it, the funeral. A researcher named Kaylee Swift, working alongside Marsloff, set out to document what crows do when they encounter one of their own dead. She presented wild crows with a dead crow's body and watched how they responded. They did not ignore it. They gathered. They called out, summoning others, until a crowd assembled, vocalizing, attentive, surrounding the place of death, and they did not approach carelessly. They held back, observed, and fixed their attention on the body and on whatever stood near it. Swift's careful interpretation is that the crows are learning, treating the dead as a lesson, asking in their own way what killed this one and whether the place is dangerous. They even came to fear the people they had seen standing beside the body. The behavior is, at root, practical, a survival strategy written in attention. But practical or not, the image is undeniable. A crowd of black birds gathered in stillness around their dead, paying a kind of attention we have no clean word for anywhere else in the animal kingdom. We call it a funeral because we have no better name, and some part of us recognizes it. Hold all of this together now, a mind that makes and keeps tools, a mind that solves Aesop's fable in a laboratory, a mind that plans, that barters, that hides its treasures from eyes it suspects are watching, a mind that remembers your face for years and teaches it to its young, and gathers around its dead. Now ask yourself, if you were an ancient people watching these birds every single day, watching them appear before storms, gather at battlefields, descend upon the dead, seeming to know things, what would you conclude? What story would you write into your clay to explain the bird that always seemed to be watching and reporting back? The Sumerians and the peoples who came after them wrote exactly such a story, and here is where we must walk carefully, separating what the tablets truly say from what we are tempted to imagine. In ancient Mesopotamia, the world was not silent. The gods spoke constantly, and not in words. They spoke in signs. The entire civilization of the Tigris and the Euphrates was built on the conviction that the divine will was written across the surface of reality itself, and that a trained eye could read it. An entire profession was devoted to that reading. A class of priest-diviners the Mesopotamians called the Baru, the seer, the one who examines. The Baru was no fringe mystic, but a learned specialist consulted by kings before war, before building, before any decision that mattered. He read the will of the gods in the shape of a newborn animal, in rising smoke, in oil spread on water, and above all in the entrails of sacrificed sheep. The liver most of all, its markings studied against clay teaching models archaeologists have since pulled from the ground by the dozen. And among the signs the diviners catalogued were the birds. This is documented, not invented. Mesopotamian scholars assembled vast multi-tablet series cataloguing every category of sign the gods might send. There is a sprawling compendium of terrestrial omens, the scholars name by its opening line. If a city is set on a height, and within it are omens drawn from the appearance, the cries and the behavior of birds. If a bird does this, such a thing will follow. If a bird is seen in that place, the king should beware. To watch the flight and the calling of birds for the intentions of the gods was an ancient art. The Hittites to the north maintaining whole guilds of trained augurs. A bird crossing your path was not random. It was correspondence, a message moving through the air, and the diviner's task was to intercept it. Think hard about what that belief contains. They held that birds carried information between the realm of the gods and the world of men, that the sky was full of messengers, and that to read the birds correctly was to eavesdrop on the divine. The bird was not the author of the message. The bird was the courier, and the question that hangs over the whole vast system is the very same one we are asking tonight. Who is the message for? Who is the bird reporting to? Their answer was the gods, the powers above and below, who ruled before men existed, and who, in the oldest stories, were not entirely pleased that men existed at all. Let me give you the figure at the dark center of this: the Anzu bird. In Mesopotamian myth, Anzu is no ordinary creature. He is a monstrous bird, depicted as a great lion-headed eagle, a being of storm and tempest, bound up with the wind and the thunderhead. And Anzu is the protagonist of one of the most revealing myths the Mesopotamians ever told. Preserved in Akkadian on recovered tablets, a myth about trust and watching and theft. At the heart of that world sat an object called the Tablet of Destinies. It was the very deed of cosmic authority, the document that conferred the right to govern the gods and to fix the fates of all things. Whoever held it held the keys to reality itself, and it belonged to Enlil, chief among the gods, and it had to be guarded. And here is the terrible irony the myth turns on. The one given a place of trust beside that power was Anzu himself. The storm bird was brought close, set at the threshold of Enlil's chamber, trusted, and it watched, day after day, learning where the power was kept and when. And one day, when Enlil laid the tablet aside to bathe in the clear water, Anzu seized his moment. He snatched the Tablet of Destinies and flew, carrying the source of all rule off into the high mountains, and in that instant, the order of the cosmos came undone. The world's authority had been stolen by the Watcher, trusted to stand beside it. The gods were thrown into dismay. With the tablet gone, the very fabric of decree was broken, and one by one the great gods were asked to recover it, and one by one they shrank from the task, for whoever held the tablet could turn the words of any attacker back upon him. At last a champion rose, the warrior god Ninurta, and went up into the mountains to make war on the storm bird. The first assaults failed, for Anzu wielded the tablet's power and reversed Ninurta's arrows in mid-flight, commanding the shaft back to the reed it was cut from. But Ninurta, counseled by the god of wisdom, loosed the winds to pin Anzu's pinions, and in the storm of that final battle, he struck the bird down and tore the Tablet of Destinies from its grasp, restoring it to the gods, and the order of the world with it. Now stay precise here. The myth of Anzu is a genuine Mesopotamian text, recovered from the clay. What it literally records is that a great storm bird, trusted and placed near the throne, stole the document of cosmic power and had to be hunted down to retrieve it. That is the record. The interpretation, the thread we are following, is the pattern beneath it. A bird, placed close to power, watching the most guarded secret in existence, that knew exactly where the source of authority was kept and exactly when it would be vulnerable. In the oldest imagination of this civilization, the bird is the insider, the eye that was always there, trusted right up until the moment it was not. And if a bird could be positioned that close to the gods, what was it positioned to do over men? Hold that question. The climax is a raven that did not come home. But first, mark this clearly, because honesty is the whole spine of what we are doing. We have moved through three things now, and only one is interpretation. The crow science is fact, tested and published. The Mesopotamian conviction that birds carry divine signs is fact, written in their own omen tablets. The Anzu myth is a real, recovered text. What I am asking you to feel is the resonance between them, the way the ancient instinct and the modern measurement circle, the same strange truth from opposite ends of 4,000 years, that the bird watches, that the bird knows, that the bird answers to something. Now, the flood. Almost everyone has heard some version of the Great Flood, the man who built a vessel and outlived the drowning of the world. Most know it through Noah, but the older telling is Mesopotamian, and it survives most fully on the 11th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh. On that tablet, an immortal survivor named Utnapishtim recounts how the gods resolved to wipe out humankind with a flood, and how the god of wisdom warned him in secret to build a great boat and take aboard his family and the seed of every living thing. He built it. The storm came, so terrible that the gods themselves were frightened by what they had unleashed, cowering like dogs against the wall of heaven as the waters drowned the world and turned all of humankind back to clay. For 6 days and nights the tempest raged, and on the 7th it grew still. The boat came to rest upon a mountain, Mount Nimush, and held fast, while the world lay drowned beneath it. And then Utnapishtim did something to learn whether the world below the water had begun to return. He sent out birds. Listen to the order of it, because the order is the whole point. First, Utnapishtim released a dove. The dove flew out across the drowned world, and finding no place to rest, no dry land, no perch, it returned to the boat. Then he released a swallow, and the swallow too flew out over the endless water, found no resting place, and came back to him. 2 birds sent, 2 birds returned. The world was still beneath the flood. And then Utnapishtim released the raven. The raven flew out over the waters, and the raven saw that the waters had gone down. It found the mud emerging, the uncovered earth. It found food. It found a place to stand and to feed, and it cawed, and it did not come back. The dove returned. The swallow returned. The raven did not return. Sit with the strangeness of that, because the ancient storyteller chose this detail deliberately. And it survived for thousands of years precisely because it carried a weight people felt. In the plain Mesopotamian reading, the raven not returning is the practical sign that the world is habitable again. The raven found land and food and had no further need of the boat. That is the documented meaning, and I will not pretend it is anything more. But notice what the image does to you anyway. The dove and the swallow come home to the human survivor, bound to him. The raven, the watcher, the most intelligent of them all, the very bird that in another myth flew off with the keys to creation, goes out over the ruined world and simply does not return. It has somewhere else to be. It is the one bird in the entire story that is not bound to the man, and the pattern does not stop at the edge of Mesopotamia. When this same flood story was retold in the book of Genesis, the raven is there again, and again set apart. Noah opens the window of the ark and sends out a raven first, and the raven goes forth to and fro, until the waters are dried from the earth, ranging over the dead world without returning to his hand. It is the dove that Noah sends after, the dove that comes back because it can find no rest, that returns with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. The dove is the one tied to the man, the bringer of the sign of peace. The raven, once more, is the one that goes out over the dead world and keeps going, unbound, unreturned. 2 flood traditions, separated by who knows how many centuries. And in both the corvid is the bird that does not come home to the human being. So here is the question this whole night has been building toward. Who do they report to? Lay it all down together now. The proven and the ancient. The crow outside your window remembers your face, and that is proven. It will remember it for years. Teach it to birds you will never meet. Hand it down to young that never saw you, and that is proven. It plans. It barters. It knows what it is to be watched. And that is proven. The ancient Mesopotamians, watching these same birds, concluded that birds were the couriers of the gods, and built an entire profession to read them, and that is documented. Their oldest myths placed a great bird at the threshold of cosmic power, close enough to steal the deed to the universe. And in their flood story, when the survivor sent his birds out over the drowned earth, it was the raven, the watcher, that did not come back. The interpretation, and I will call it interpretation plainly, without dressing it up as fact, is the one the ancients themselves would have recognized without flinching, that the watching is not idle, that the bird at your window is not merely a clever animal recalling a threat, that it is, in the oldest grammar of human belief, an eye positioned over the world of men, gathering what it sees and carrying it, the way the raven flew out and did not return, somewhere, to someone. To the old powers that, in these very stories, were never at ease with us. The gods who in the flood myth tried to drown us and then set their watchers over what was left. Now the science cannot prove that, and I will not let you walk away believing it does. There is no laboratory result showing that a crow reports to a god. The proven facts are the memory, the grudge, the teaching, the gathering, the intelligence. The ancient material is the omen tradition, the Balaam and his signs, the Anzu who stole the tablet of Destinies, the raven that flew from the flood and did not return. The bridge between them, the idea that the watching has a purpose and a recipient, is the oldest story humanity ever told about these birds. The science proves the memory is real. The tablet claims to know what the memory is for, and that is what makes it so impossible to shake. Every part of this that could be tested came back true. The crow really does remember you. The grudge really does outlive the bird. The funeral really does happen. Every place where we could check the ancient instinct against modern measurement, the instinct held, the birds really are watching. They really do remember, and they carry it forward. So the next time you step outside, and the black bird on the wire turns its head to follow you, hold this in your mind. It knows your face. That is certain. It will remember you long after you have forgotten this very moment. That is certain. And 4,000 years ago, a people far wiser about these birds than we have been comfortable admitting, looked up at that same patient, unblinking eye, and they did not see an animal. They saw a messenger, and they asked the only question that mattered, not whether the bird was watching, for they knew it was watching. They asked who it was watching for, and the honest answer is the one the clay gives, and the science cannot deny. The watching is real. The memory is real. The carrier that flies out and does not return is written into our oldest stories of the end of the world. What waits at the other end of that flight? Who receives the report? That is the threshold where proof ends and the oldest fear of mankind begins. The Mesopotamians had no doubt at all. They built their whole civilization on the certainty that nothing you did beneath the open sky went unseen, and that the birds were the eyes of something far older than kings. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe it is only a clever bird with a long memory and a talent we are still learning to measure. Or maybe the people who read the liver and the oil and the flight of wings, who wrote of the storm bird at the throne and the raven that flew from the flood and never came home, knew something we traded away for comfort, that you are not as alone in your own backyard as you have always believed, that you are remembered, and that the remembering serves a purpose you were never meant to know. If this opened something in you, if you felt that small cold turn the moment the pieces met, then you already belong here, in the vault, where we go to the places the textbooks will not follow. Subscribe, and stay close, because the watchers in the ancient record do not end with the birds, because the tablets describe another set of eyes, not in the sky, in the ground. The Mesopotamians wrote of beings that watched the world of men from below, from beneath the earth and the rivers, from the great deep where the oldest god of wisdom was said to dwell. And in the next descent into the vault, we will ask the question that should keep you awake tonight. If the birds were the eyes above us, what was watching from below? And why did the old texts warn that it never slept?